Welcome to Inspired Edinburgh, the home of powerful conversations. I'm Elliot Reeves, and my guest today is Sandy Kennedy. Sandy is Chief Executive of Entrepreneurial Scotland, an organisation that delivers world-class programmes, manages a fast-growing membership network, and supports some of the country's most successful entrepreneurs. You're at the forefront of a movement to inspire and develop Scotland's people to build the most entrepreneurial society in the world. You're on the advisory boards of the Hunter Centre for Entrepreneurship, M.I.T REAP Scotland, Informatics Ventures and Scottish Edge, and you're on the board of Social Investment Scotland. I knew that one would trip me up. Sandy, it's an honour to have you here.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. So, in the beginning, I suppose if we can start with, Sandy's early life, where you grew up, and I suppose what that experience was like for you.
Of course. So I think a fairly classic middle-class background, if I'm honest, and sometimes you can be an apologist for that, but from my point of view, it was a very happy upbringing. I was brought up in the West Coast, and was based in Bothwell, so a nice area in Lanarkshire. Mm-hmm. But I suppose a key factor, and I think I'm sure we'll come back to this, was that I came from a family business background, of which our family business was laterally in dry cleaning and in photo developing, but prior to that and through multi-generations was in laundries. So really? Very focused on the customer, anybody being a customer, and also service and the importance of service. And as my dad always reminded us, I'll never forget, we make our money by washing people's clothes. So I think, hopefully that's left me with some humility in the process, and very much recognising that everybody's got something to contribute. Yeah. But I suppose that a really good grounding in business and, as you say, kind of customer relations. I think so. I think that, and in a way I would urge all the next generation to do this as well, and certainly my kids are doing that, from the age, I think I was legally allowed to do it, but from the age of 14 I worked in shops. So being on a counter, and this was a counter type of, imagine a dry cleaning store type of environment. So that relationship where you're dealing with customer after customer after customer after customer, and you're dealing with good stuff, bad stuff, things not arriving back, things being for a wedding and being wonderful, or it's not there and it's not wonderful. That experience, I think, of working from a very early age, focused on the customer, working with fabulous, I was always, obviously being 14, I was the youngest, but most of the people in those types of stores were in their 50s, even into their 60s, and from very good working class backgrounds, and I was very much knew my place. And I think that again is a great foundation for humility, to realise that people work really hard at these sorts of jobs. And if I were, and at that point, I wasn't even sure what I was going to go and do, but I think that was very formative for me. Well, you went on to study law at Cambridge. I did, yeah. Yeah. So what were your career aspirations at that stage? So I'm going to take it back a bit as to what my career aspirations were. So again, clearly I'm going to bring my dad in again. My mum has been a huge influence on me too. Age 16 or so, I was all the way through, I was the eldest, but I was bright and good at exams, but even my mum and dad didn't really go to university, or my dad actually went but didn't stay. And I remember my dad sitting me down when I was 16 saying, son, if you don't want to go to university, or you don't think you can get to university, then that's absolutely fine, and started talking to me about at that time Marks and Spencer's did a very good straight from school program. So age 16, even though academically I was strong, I was doing well, I had no sense of pressure from my parents that you got to go and do all that sort of stuff. So the home environment was very open, and obviously came from, I suppose, an entrepreneurial family in that way. However, having said all that, I was good at exams. I was good at getting results. Did other sport and other stuff. So I was being pushed into going to university, and I think, so this would be mid-80s, and I think it still exists today, hopefully not as bad, that if you were bright, if you're good at exams, if you did other things, then what you were offered was said, well, that means you must be an accountant, a lawyer, or a doctor, and possibly an engineer, which would be probably that's a huge fan of engineers. Not that I'm not a fan of doctors and lawyers and accountants, but I think there's an issue there that we have a tendency in our society, in our culture, to present them as being the exemplar career choices. So I was doing well, and they said, oh, maybe you should think about doing law, etc. So I thought, oh, well, that sounds interesting. I was interested more generally in business, and people said, oh, law is a great grounding and stuff. And as it happened, it was or is. But I went into it a bit blind. It wasn't like I always wanted to be a lawyer and I always went to Cambridge. I suppose my point is, I didn't really know what university was about. I didn't know about law, but followed that. So I had a place at Edinburgh University to do law, and I just got to sitting my final exams actually, and I just before, I remember a couple of weeks before them, I realised, why am I going to Edinburgh? Because I sort of knew Edinburgh reasonably well at that point. I thought I need to branch out. So I actually wrote to Edinburgh, said I'm not coming, and then didn't have anywhere to go to university. I sat my exams, I did well on my exams, and then somebody said, well, you should really be looking to Cambridge.
Really?
So that's why I did it. And then I did law because I wasn't I was good on the science side, but I wasn't good enough to get into Cambridge to do maths and physics. But I was quite good at English as well. And I had an interest. So I applied to do law, and that was something that I couldn't have studied at my sort of higher and A levels. So that's where I ended up. So I don't want to make it so it wasn't random, but it wasn't a big plan out. And then so the first point I was making there about how we push a lot of our talent into those sort of traditional careers, and clearly those careers, the prospects for those careers has changed. At university, once you're in the system, and again, I'm conscious I was in a very privileged position. At Cambridge, all the big firms came to us. So they would come to us and they would court us, and it's very easy then to fall into a pathway where they're paying you through law school, they're giving you a job at a salary you couldn't have imagined, they're taking out, at that time, I was quite interested in going out and having a few beers, and they would do all that sort of stuff, and so it became very easy. And I think that a lot of, I don't know the Edinburgh law scene, for instance, so well, but that I was in London, a lot of people end up in law and maybe 10 years on go, why am I here? What am I doing? I'd rather be this or be that. So there we go. So I think there was a wee bit, the process took hold of me, and then I got shunted through it.
And so given where you are now, I mean, do you feel as though that experience was beneficial?
Definitely. I think beneficial, and I'm a believer that all experiences that you have on the way through shape you in some ways. Some really very positively, and some maybe you have to watch for that actually they're damaging, or they're making you narrow-minded. You know, I'd seen plenty of people. I worked in the city for, I can't remember, 7-8 years, and that experience was amazing, but it also narrows your mind as to reality sometimes. So I think there's a blend there. But to give you a couple of examples, which I hadn't really thought about. So if you fast forward a little, I ended up starting a business within the bigger family business for a bunch of reasons. And that was a business which, in fact, I was the first employee in, and I did it, and I built the business plan, rolled it out, but I was effectively the marketer as well. And it wasn't until I was with somebody who's one of my mentors, world-class marketer. He said that his view was that my legal training made me very good at marketing, and very particularly good at getting clear about what the message is that you want to convey and finding a way to do it. So I never crossed my mind that law and marketing would go well together. And I think the other thing that it gives you is at its worst, a pedantry at its best an inquiry of really digging in and thinking, how does that work? How can you make it better? And so I think that, and also an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
The best lawyers often, as you probably encountered, are sometimes they never actually give you an opinion because they'll, no, it's like this, but it could be like that. And if it's not like that, it'll be like this. So choose one. I can't possibly choose. It's like, so sometimes lawyers can be very bad at decision making because they're always flipping it onto the client to make the decision. So.
Mm-hmm. So how did you, in terms of the sort of path that you went on, how did you eventually become Chief Executive of Entrepreneurial Scotland? What was the link?
Well, there is a pathway. It's interesting when I've answered that question before. I find if I start from where I am today, going backwards, it just doesn't make sense. But if you start from the past and come forwards, which was the version I experienced, then it does make sense. So, university, law firm in the, or law college, law firm in the city. I then did 2 years qualification, 2 years post-qualification, and then moved to 3i, which is a VC firm. So what you're seeing in that early stage, so it took me to about 30 in London, what you're seeing is I came from an entrepreneurial background, I do a more traditional degree, I then go into quite a traditional setting, but within the city doing M&A was what I was doing, with a specialism in buyouts. I then go into a buyout specialist firm, but I end up doing a lot of the venture capital, so that was more of the early tech type of investing. So what you see is a bit of investment, a bit of academics, a bit of entrepreneurship, and I always wanted to be on the other side of the table. So I always felt akin to that poor person who's looking for, in 3i terms, it was a small amount of money at that time, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, because buyouts is 50 million, 100 million. So I always felt more affinity with that person who's on the other side of the table, who had their dreams set in their mind and were trying to achieve it. So that then brought me to that stage, and I'm sure through a variety of personal circumstances, like not finding the right girlfriend and all this, maybe going, I realised there was a point in London when I was a VIP member of too many nightclubs that I thought, no, this is not, and I wasn't abusing anything, I just enjoyed it. It was an amazing time for London. But I just felt, is this what it's all about? And so I decided not to. So I decided to go to business school, because at that time, business school particularly was the thing to do an MBA. So I looked to go to America, and then decided to actually go to Strathclyde to do my MBA. And the reason was because I felt that it was a terrific school. However, I didn't need another blue chip name on my list. What I needed was practical, gritty stuff. And I needed to be in the community that I wanted to, where my intent was to end up. So that took me one step. I then I very nearly went back 3i, but I went back into the family business, but we were more complex in terms of the shareholder structure, which I won't go into, but it meant that I was never actually going to be sort of on the mainstream business. I was never going to be sort of the main person, if I deserved that anyway. So I started this new business, which is a mail order photo business, and linked to online. It was just at the cusp of, so this would be 2001. So it's effectively an online business and a mail order business linked together. And it did really, really well. And so that was me. So the first time effectively starting something from scratch, albeit within a relative comfort of another company. Starting from scratch, growing it, I was at my happiest. I loved it, absolutely loved it. And then from there, as digital cameras were coming in and stuff, us and Boots were the two biggest in the whole of the UK by this time. Wow. I ended up moving across and doing that, sort of online digital stuff, but actually effectively being business development and marketing director for the whole group, and then me and another guy, the production director, ended up running the business for a period of time. The result of that, though, sadly, was our overhead was too high in retail, etc. We had 600 stores at that point, 4 big labs, or through the process we had 4 big labs, and really our cost base was too big. So we went into administration in December 2008, very much at the helm, piping down at the top of as the ship went down, so 5 generations of family business. And I came out the back of that, obviously with, you know, I didn't lose my house, you know, it could have been a lot worse, you know, I had my health, or these things, but no backdrop to that anymore. But still with a lot of things to feel very grateful for. And a real sense of the staff. That was my biggest, you know, if I get emotional about it, then it's the staff that were left behind that I really feel for. And I was prepared to look at anything. So I had all this background, but what that then applied, and if you think about that was 2008, so Lehman Brothers had just gone down. We banked with the Bank of Scotland, they'd just gone bust. You know, there was utter mayhem, nobody knew what was going on. So I said to my wife Christy, and said, well, I'll look at any job anywhere, doing anything, any sector. And lo and behold, I got, and I then started to make inquiries, and got approached by Odgers to become the first employee of the Salter Foundation, which was an idea at that point, and you know, Scottish Enterprise had done a good job in developing it with a really great set of trustees, but they wanted to get up and away. So I became the first employee back in March 2009. So there's me finding myself effectively running a charity. So it's not what I was expecting. But loved it, and I've loved it ever since. And then from there, Salter Foundation was very much about developing talent, the next generation. I started working with lots of others, and the Entrepreneurial Exchange was an organisation we'd worked a lot with. And that was an organisation with a lot of opportunity looking for talent. So bring the two organisations together, and then with a terrific board and a great chair in Chris Vander Kyle, a very visionary individual, and doing that with, I suppose, a bigger, bolder vision, which you outlined a little at the beginning. Then it had to be more than just the sum of the existing parts. It had to be much more. So that's what I've been sort of wrestling with, I guess, for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's a journey,
no, that's perfect.
It's a journey, but
a really good overview.
But if you'd asked I don't know, my 21-year-old self who was looking at going to the city and said, right, so your family business will be gone. You'll never use law. You're going to be working in a not-for-profit, looking at entrepreneurship. I don't know what I'd have said. I said, well, am I happy? Probably, hopefully I would have said it that inside. So yeah. I'll tell myself, yes, I am. So.
Excellent. In terms of the vision, you know, I mean, it's an enormous vision.
Indeed.
Where did that originally stem from?
So I think I'm going to answer that in 2 different ways. One is I can give you the origin story, so I can tell you where it comes from. And the other part of it really is really more forward-looking, is why say it at all. So the origin story is bringing 2 organisations together. We didn't want it to be a takeover one or the other, so we effectively created a holding company and put a board in there, and then said, right, okay, this is the organisation, this is our strategy or vision, I guess, in the lower sense of vision of where we're trying to go. And then through that process, you've got a new group of people coming together, some with a heritage at the Salter Foundation, some with a heritage in the Entrepreneurial Exchange, and some who are completely new to it. And it was that group that, working together and going through a process of vision, mission, etc., that came up with that vision. And it was probably, as like any good origin story, there'll be multi mothers and fathers to that vision. I'm going to credit Richard Dixon with it. Certainly that's the one that sticks in my head, because we were talking a lot about how this had to be more than just about developing people. It had to be more than just about the community around it. It had to be about culture. And so Ewan Brown, who's also on board, was red hot on this. Frankly, unless we change the culture or adapt the culture or it evolves, then we're just going to be talking about this again and again. So that's where we started focusing on the society. So we started talking about it needs to be an entrepreneurial society. And it was Richard Dixon said, well, if we're going to do it at all, we may as well be the best. So it was as much well, if we're going to bother trying, then so that's where that came from. So that's the origin story. I think I suppose this is a bit of a backwards looking forwards, is when you look at that statement, clearly we aren't at the moment. Clearly we can aspire to it, and there's plenty of examples of people who talk a good game and say that's what it is. I think it was another entrepreneur actually who said it, well, his name's Hannah Goodridge, who I have a huge amount of time for, and hugely admire, great brain. He said, you've got to remember, this is about the journey. It's not actually about the destination. It's not about becoming the most, it's the journey from where you are today of where you're going to get to. Partly because when you get there, you're going to want to go on another journey. However, it's that setting off on a journey with an intent. So that's, for me, so the origin story I think is really interesting, but actually what's more powerful is about intent and purpose, and recognizing that you're marking yourself on a journey. So Hamid was amazing at helping with that.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually. So I mean, how far, my question's actually changed from what it was originally going to be. How far have we progressed in recent times, and what are we aspiring to? What does it actually look like?
Yeah. So answering the first one first, how far we've come, clearly it depends on where your start point is. But if I use the autumn of 2014, so that's when Entrepreneurial Scotland was created, that's when the vision, I guess, was minted in the crucible of fire and smoke or whatever. Yeah. How far we've come, I think we will look back probably more in a few years' time and say we've come an enormous distance. And the reason I say that is because, and the examples of that, I suppose, is the language that's now being used. And I just use two extremes. You have an entrepreneurial or government that's talking about an entrepreneurial culture, not just once, not just in the, we're talking to entrepreneurial types, we'll just talk about it, but again and again and again. So the programme for government that's just come through from the Scottish government is talking about it. And there's even a line, which many people have seen, is say, we want our government to be entrepreneurial. So that, I see that as a huge statement. Similarly with the UK government, that engagement around entrepreneurial thinking, entrepreneurial mindset, and then those people who are doing it as being hugely important. So I think that's on that side, sort of almost like the policy, big picture side. And then when you look at the other side, which goes to this point about society, at a much more sort of, rubber hitting the road sort of stage, is at that time, in 2014, well, I suppose they existed, but it was early stages. eSpark, Codebase, Acorn, Elevator were really relatively in their infancy at that stage. The conversations we're having now about scale-ups was really in its infancy. You had quite a diverse group of people doing things in isolation. There's much more cohesion than there was before. I think that the interest in entrepreneurial thinking generally and entrepreneurship more specifically is much greater than it's been in my time. So I think that's progress. I think then you look to, in our case, Salter Scholar programs, Salter Fellow programs, New Scotland's Can Do Scale Up program. You've got other programs that are running, Converge is up and away and is doing amazing things. There's a lot of progress. So I think we have come a long way. The reason I say I think it's going to be looking back that we'll see it, because I think we're at a moment where we need to create greater cohesion around the activities, because it's only through that the real value can be driven out of it. Because a criticism would be it's cluttered, there's fragmentation, there's lots of people, competing voices, and critically importantly, our economics indicators are not showing that we're good at this. We've got a long way to go. So, but I think that groundswell that started is the foundation to build on.
And so in what way will Entrepreneurial Scotland facilitate and support the growth of Scotland?
I see it, we've got probably 3 roles to play in that. And I probably should, and in a way, when I say play, I think that the way we look at it needs to be not just what we do, but there's going to be elements of what from there that we can do with others, so co-produce or joint venture or whatever. And then there's another group of things which we're going to see that are really important to us, but actually we just say to people, get on yourself, that is brilliant, we're with you, just do it. So we actually, it's more about influence rather than about us either doing or co-producing it. So I think that through that lens, there's three particular areas that we will be focusing in on. One is, I'm a huge believer and supported by research, etc., that ultimately it comes down to people, and it comes down to, in this particular part, a relatively small subset of people, which are the ones who are going to be the leaders or the change makers or the innovators, those ones who are going to be the ones who are going to create the change. And the reason I focus on them is not that everybody else is not really important, because they are. It's just that shouldn't be about we're trying to create an organization where everybody just runs to our tune, or it's more, well, if we can create lots of people doing lots of things and they run their own organizations and create the cultures, that's how you're going to get scale. So first thing is around the leaders and the future leaders. Scotland needs world-class programs and development opportunities, etc. We run 3, but others run other great ones. And so I think that'd be point 1, is how we develop our people and how we invest in the next generation. The second thing is then, okay, so having done that, or continues to do that every year, how do you create an efficient grid or network or something for the very best ideas and experiences and investment and talent and access to flow. So what I think we've got in Scotland, I think we have all the natural resources, human capital we need, probably have all the investment we need relative to other countries, but it's just not connecting into the right places. There's silos. So I see that a bit like a electricity grid, that, you know, when you get that working, the electricity can flow everywhere and all sorts of magic stuff happens. But if you only have a power plant over here and a few lines of grid, then the whole place doesn't light up. So I see that second phase is actually, how do you join the dots? How do you get that grid working? The third element is, in a way, if you've got the people, you've got them connected and you've got that your grid working, is how do you clear the rest of the path and then make sure that it's as easy as possible for those people who are trying to drive change or innovate or lead a business or do something in the third sector or a charity or in government, that they've got that path. And that comes much more down to the culture. So there's a lot we can do, of which a big starter for 10 is how we collaborate better. So how do we get better on the support and the sort of support ecosystem side? How do we get better at collaborating? So that it's not, oh no, my program's better than your program, or my network's better than your network. No. Here is that person, we've got to support them. How do we work together to do that?
Yeah. My next question is probably leading on from that, but what do you think business leaders can do to help more, to support that?
I think first thing, looking at business leaders themselves, being the best leader they can be. So particular, or not particularly, all people who are trying to grow something or create something, it comes with its pressures, it comes with its challenges, and the skills, the more softer traits that you need to have around resilience and emotional intelligence, etc. Be the best leader you can be, because ultimately the impact that you have on your organization and how that's led and how you build in values, etc., will have an impact, not just direct impact on the performance of that organization and therefore the economy, etc., but also in those people who you're working with, because they will go on and do other things and they'll take a bit of that away. So that's probably the primary thing. I think the second thing is then, how do you then connect into more broadly outside of your organization? And that can take, how do you connect with your peer group? So how do you help each other? Non-competing areas. And that might be you've cracked the code when it comes to, cash flow management, and somebody else is really struggling with cash flow. We'll help them do better, because they might be amazing at, acquiring new customers in Canada, and you want to enter Canada, so do that. So that peer engagement. And then similarly, how you inspire the next generation. So there's a role that you can play in terms of engaging with the next generation, because they need that inspiration as well. So there would be a couple of ways. One is be the best leader you can be, and also then connect out both. And I'm a big believer in pay forward. So, and certainly in my life, I find the more I give out, the more I get back. And I think that would be the second area. Yeah, be passionate. Care about, do stuff you care about.
It's a really good answer. I like that. How have you evolved as a person throughout your career?
Man, I think the first thing is I never think I ever saw myself as having a career. So how have I evolved as a person? I don't know, actually. I have asked myself that question. I think and this is maybe not even quite answering it, is I knew very clearly in my head at various points in my so-called career where I didn't want to be, and that there was something. So therefore, by definition, when I do feel that I am somewhere I do want to be, then whilst I'm not maybe acknowledging it myself, that must mean something. So if I take being a lawyer in a fabulous law firm, sort of like my kids watch Suits, you know, the TV program, and they love it. They go, oh, I want to be a lawyer. I said, that is what my law career was like. And they go, yeah, but that's amazing. Why are you not doing it? I said, well, do you not notice that they're all friends with each other and they have no friends outside of the whole TV program? They're all having relationships inside the office, some of them with people explicitly and some people explicitly. That, yes, they go into that court case where they come up with the amazing, that happens, but what it doesn't show you is that you had to do, well, in litigation terms, probably about 3 years worth of grunt work to get to that moment. So it's all true, but it's edited. And, you know, and I just felt I wanted to do stuff that, you know, energized me on a day-to-day basis. I wasn't just reading another textbook or working out how to order some papers, or I was a ninja at photocopying and fax machining and all that stuff. That's a nice retro point for those people who've never heard of what a fax machine is. But so I think I knew it wasn't the right place for me, and now I find, so I think I'm very sensory, so therefore I could feel that was the right thing. But how have I developed? I don't know. I think it's probably better ask one of my long-standing friends, I think, but I feel I'm pretty much the same person I was then.
Really?
Hopefully, I've probably forgotten a lot of stuff, but I've picked up a few things on the way through. I was always doing stuff like, I never did, if I looked, say, at university, I don't remember this the other day because we were talking about it, but I organised like Scottish events at university and accidentally made a load of money doing it. I didn't go out with the intent to make lots of money. I went out because I thought, I was at Cambridge University, and slightly looking Scotland is a slightly odd place up north. So I thought, oh, it'd be great. We put these events on, and you get bagpipes, and I could wear my kilt and use it because there was obviously lots of other Scots there. So they would all come, and then we'd all walk around, wear kilts, and all my English friends would go, wow, this is great. And I then wrote to whiskey companies and said, oh, we're doing this at Cambridge University, it's a good idea. Why don't you send us whiskey? And then all of a sudden, like, cases of whiskey arrived. Whoa, wow. And then I worked out how to get a free venue and then blagged somebody to sponsor the food, and I thought, so effectively, I was working like 90% margin on the event. Wow. And I went, whoa, how do you do that? So that was ages ago. But it was, I suppose what I did was I did it for the purpose first, and the cash was an accident. And I used to organise nightclub nights and that sort of stuff. Not because I made any money out of it, but because I love seeing people having a good time, doing good stuff. So there's a bit of that. And why I love what I do is that sense of, when you see people who make a connection that would have never made if you hadn't helped, or something happened that, because they're an Entrepreneurial Scotland member, they do this or that, then I love it, love it. I don't need to be there.
Sorry, yeah. What do you feel your purpose in life is?
Purpose in life? Well, I mean, ultimately, ultimately it doesn't quite answer your question, but it does to me, which is to be the best person I can be. So it's the thing I can control. So if I'm that, then and I do that with some sort of intent, then stuff will happen and I can be happy at the end of it. I think is my purpose to help Scotland be the most entrepreneurial society in the world. I could create a case for that because I come from a long family background of washing people's clothes and all that sort of stuff. I come from, I think one of the things that, you know, I hate it a bit under a bushel for sometimes, but going to Cambridge opens your eyes to what networks really look like when they're functioning. Now, don't get me wrong, old boys networks exist in spades. City network exists in spades. Cambridge Oxbridge network exists in spades. So I sort of, rather than going, that's either, oh, that's lovely, thank you very much, I'll just take all that and I'll privileged position, or equal, no, I don't want that. I sort of, well, why is that? It serves a purpose. It does a job. So, so in what I do now, I love the fact that sort of, as somebody put it, you know, if you had the old boys network, what you're creating is the new people's network. It's sort of, I like that. That was actually some time ago. They coined that. And I think, yeah, so that would be, so purpose, it starts with who, and there is obviously some philosophy behind it, but it starts with who you are or who I am. Yeah. And if I'm true to that, and then work out from there. Yeah, and you know, who I am and then what I do, and you know, then stuff will happen beyond that. I don't know, you probably should ask some of my team because they probably think I'm a bit bonkers sometimes, but apart from that.
So in terms of kind of being the best you that you can be, does that require you to kind of live in alignment with a certain value structure, or you know, do you kind of, you know, measure yourself relative to anything?
It's a good question. So classically, that would be religion or a certain, you know, credo or something that somebody that would hold. I'm influenced by that, but it's not something that I use. I suppose I feel I'm probably a bit more freeform. So it's like, so I must have a very, and maybe put it down to my parents or my schooling or stuff that I found that worked, is being open-minded, being, try not to judge people first up, try to, and I don't always do it, but equally I don't give myself a good kicking if I don't. I sort of, so I don't think I'm answering your question because I don't think I do it, but hopefully I do it more intuitively than I do it rationally. Yeah.
That makes sense.
I definitely have a bit of a pleaser challenge. So I think I'm probably quite emotionally aware. So therefore I'm watching how people are responding, and if people I care about are responding back to me that I think they're upset or whatever, then I tend to feel that. So yeah, and that can be a problem sometimes because then you can't quite see what the right path is, because if you're measuring how well you're doing against people you care about's response to you, then that can give you a 90% good result, but for that 10% it might mislead you. So yeah, I do feel very centered and sort of solid around, you know, those sort of things, but yeah, it's not, maybe it doesn't have a fabric that's laid around either, you know, through his centuries of religion or you know, something I've written down, so yeah, I must do that and I must measure myself against it.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty consistent. I think one of my strengths is I'm pretty consistent at it. I think that, again, like your question before, if you ask some of my school friends, how different am I to the person that they knew back at school, I'd hope anyway that they would say that I'm pretty much the same. So I don't know why that happened, no idea. I quite enjoy it, so it's not, you know, something I want to continue.
What would you like your legacy to be? How would you like to be remembered?
I think it depends on who, because you say, you know, I do believe that legacy is very much about how other people see you rather than how you see yourself. So, you know, my kids and my family, really important. I think that I was present, I was there, not always in a constructive way, I'm sure, but largely, I would like to be largely constructive. That was quite fun to be around and brought different dimensions to our family life. So that be that part. I think my friends, similarly, they go, our lives were enriched by being around him. And I think in the sort of world that I'm in, I think I've thought about it, and I'm not sure this analogy will come across, but it works in my head, and that is that, you know, I mentioned earlier about how I used to organise nightclub nights and all that sort of stuff, and the way the business model side was, I realised that nightclubs have an issue in London anyway. You had a problem whereby between 8 o'clock and 11 o'clock they were completely empty, but they needed to staff them up. And then at 11 o'clock you ended up with queues round the back of the corner, and then it was like really inefficient. So I probably didn't use the word inefficient at the time, but I just could see that. So what I did was went to the nightclubs and said, I tell you what, I'll bring a crowd. If I can get a crowd in here at 8 o'clock, you serve the drinks at the prices that the pubs would charge, and they get in for free. But I will deliver the crowd. And nightclubs loved it, because the bottom line is any bar takings between 8 and 11 were upside, even if it was at slightly lower prices, and they didn't have to manage. They had a full club from the moment they needed it at 11 o'clock. Yeah. That was great. I loved it, not because I didn't make any money off that. I probably could have made a lot of money off it if I wanted to, but I remember it, and I now actively seek this moment. It usually was about 12:30 at night when the club was rocking and everybody's having a blast, and I would look around that club and I would go, I know nearly everybody in this room, and the people I don't know are connected to each other or in some way, rather than just a random group of strangers. And I would always like to stand beside the bar with a beer and a pal and say, God, isn't this great? So to me, legacy, the equivalent legacy to now would be to be able to enjoy a beer with a pal at a bar somewhere and look around Scotland and go, oh, look at that. Look at all these great people doing great stuff, achieving whatever it is they want to do. I say, I have something to do with that. So legacy would. So my legacy is a nightclub analogy. There you go. That's as close as I can get.
Oh, that's a super cool answer, though.
Oh, it's really I don't know.
No, it's good.
It's good. The soundtrack behind it, maybe. Although as I now, and I have to say I quite like this, although I remember my mum and dad saying this to me, so that was sort of mid-90s. So I was into, you know, dance music and that sort of stuff from about late 80s. So a lot of that stuff is all coming round again. Yeah. So it's stuff that my children are listening to. I'll say, oh yeah, that's got that from that and that from that, and oh yeah, it's a great tune. And I think, it's quite cool, Dad, thanks. So I don't think I'm cool in many other ways, but I quite enjoy that. I enjoy my music.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I've never really thought about it. I think there's lots of advice. I think, probably building off what we've talked off already, but things like be clear with yourself first, what you're trying to do. And if you work to that and gather people around you, then so I think that kind of sense of purpose and focus is really important. I think it's not so much advice, but something that and I suppose I can retrospectively put it into being advice, but some of the really most fundamental shifts in my thinking or opportunity have come from the most fleetingness, if that's a word, of meeting of somebody else. And it's planned, it's intent, it's full of intent. So I'll give you an example. Would be, so I was building, I mentioned before, I was building this mail order online photo business. And so in the UK, there was a number of incumbents. Older people will recognise these names like TruePrint, Bonus Print, etc., who were big businesses at that time. But very much they were doing exactly the same as it had been done for the last 30 years probably. So the models hadn't changed. So I was looking at it saying, well, what does a new, who is brilliant at this globally? So I used our network to work out, to find out who was doing it really well. And what emerged was it was this Australian guy called Rob Tolmie, who I sort of triangulated in on him. But the issue was he lived in Brisbane, and I lived in Glasgow. But what I did was, and most of the industry did, we would meet in Las Vegas or New Orleans every year to gather as an industry. And it was I was with somebody, so I'd worked out that he was the guy I wanted to speak to. And I happened to be with, this guy happened to be Danish, Gorm Christensen, and he said, oh, there he is over there. Remember you were asking, there he is over there. And he was literally walking through a lobby of a hotel. And because I'd asked him ages ago, and he said, so there he is. So I rushed over to him and said, Rob, you don't know who I am. I'm setting up an online mail order business in Scotland. I hear you are the man. I would love to spend some time, but you're on the way something. I get your card, and I'd love to just spend an hour on the phone with you. He said, I won't do his accent, but he said, of course, that's not a problem. Here's my card. So I put my card, put it in my pocket, made sure I didn't lose it, and headed back to Scotland. Did the conference, headed back to Scotland. Fast forward to today, that guy is the godfather to my children. He was my mentor creating the new business. He then ended up coming onto our board back here in Scotland and used to travel every month from Australia to be on our board. He has led, I would say, on photo industries in a pretty brutal environment, but he probably has led or influenced virtually all of the most successful photo businesses, mostly online, globally. And and I just saw him 3 weeks ago, and he's a very dear friend and somebody who's thinking I value. But it all came from that moment in the lobby of the Peabody, and it was literally. But it had a lot of prep before, so I knew who I wanted to speak to. I was with that, and then serendipity happened that I could get him, and I took it. So it's not really, you're asked about advice that people give me, but I suppose through experience is taking those opportunities, but being really, it's not, oh, I would love to meet, I don't know, Sir Tom Hunter. Why? What is it you want out of it? Why is it? And then what is it your follow through action is going to be? And then how do you deal with it? That would be, so.
Do you believe in fate?
I don't believe in fate, but I do believe in that opportunities emerge through an element of serendipity. So I probably believe in serendipity over fate.
Okay.
That there's and some of the stuff, I'm not smart enough to see it, but there's some stuff that I'm sure there's science behind it, the serendipity, and some of it, who knows, something spiritual behind it. I have no idea. But I do believe that putting yourself in the right places with the right intent and being aware, stuff happens for sure. And I think it's even there's the physical putting yourself there, but it's also the mental. If you're under deep pressure, feeling stressed, locked down, then your ability to see where an opportunity might be just passing straight past you to solve all your problems, you might not see it. Equally, I also believe that under stress, and sometimes you see things you don't see otherwise because you're forced to.
Mm-hmm.
So there's each. I probably sound, I know I'm probably being influenced by some friends like Colette Grant, who, each, I suppose, phase is what it is. It's not better or worse, so therefore you just have to accept that it is what it is and then deal with what it is in front of you, and take from it what you can. So yeah, I think it's right. We were judging the Entrepreneur of the Year awards last week, and a very successful entrepreneur in questions about what were his biggest lessons that he'd learned, and I think he put it better than I did. He said that actually within every challenge there's an opportunity. You just got to be able to see it. So that would be, there you go. There's a good tip.
Yeah.
It's not mine. Somebody else's.
You mentioned, or you kind of touched upon this earlier, but I think you were projecting forward rather than looking back. But if you had the opportunity to speak to your 20-year-old self, what would you say?
I would say relax, but really work hard and try hard at what you're doing, everything you do. Have fun doing it. And yeah, that would be it. That would be it. I think it's just, yeah, it sounds a bit, live every day, blah, blah, blah. But that sort of thing is, yeah, just, yeah, be the best you can do at all the stuff, and be bold and try things that are different. And yeah. It's not a lot, and particularly I think when you're 20, I think if I was speaking to a 20-year-old rather than my 20-year-old self, is the stuff that you can get wrong or really give it a go at when you're 20 is different to the stuff that you can have a go at when you're 40, or I'm 48. And that probably is as much a mindset, so I sort of have to self-critique myself there. But you do have other dependents and responsibilities that can then inhibit you when you're in your early 20s. You don't.
Yeah.
Be equally, you don't have the experience or the network or the connections. So there's yeah, two sides of it.
If you could change anything in the world, what would it be and why?
I'm going to choose something more because I had a conversation, I'm going to get a late night conversation with actually an Australian guy about this. And what it is I see that in the world at the moment, and I would argue I'm a big believer that a lot of these things have existed for a long time, so it's not like, oh, in our moment it's the worst moment or the best moment. Probably a lot of it is ebbed and flowed over history, is that we're at a moment where it feels that people are locking down their solutions. I'm talking here not in technology where the opposite's happening, but I'm meaning, if you look at Brexit, if you look at Trump America, you look at, North Korea is probably the wrong thing, but you're seeing some inward looking, close it out, shut it down kind of mindsets. I believe that all the greatest things that have ever been achieved have been achieved in collaboration and with open. So if I could change one thing, it would be that we recognise that the best for all of us is the openness and collaboration and support, and try and bring a culture that does that. But that maybe sounds a wee bit hippie-like, and it's not. It has an element of that hippie-like, but it's more that I also believe that we need people to be going out and be the best they can be and strive and be ambitious and all that sort of stuff. But it's important they're part of the fabric and celebrated for that within the community. Not either they go off to the gated communities or they get pelters for being successful. Who do you think you are? Or if you're an immigrant coming into the country, that we should be celebrating that they're here and understanding the value they bring, rather than pushing that away, saying, you've taken our jobs, well, let's just make more jobs.
Yeah.
Rather than, let's try and divvy up the ones we've got better. But that's easy for me to say. I'm conscious if I was, hadn't had a job for 10 years and felt that somebody was coming in and taking all the opportunity, and then I would probably feel differently. So I'm empathetic to that, but my view is that shutting everything down it's not going to solve it.
Yeah, definitely.
And being entrepreneurial.
Yeah, of course.
Line is.
Of course.
Yes, I should have said that. That would be my magic one. Because I believe that if you are entrepreneurial and you have an entrepreneurial culture and you inspire entrepreneurial thinking and mindset, wherever it is, that's going to do it.
Yeah, I suppose it's the whole idea of having a growth mindset over I don't know what the alternative is, a closed, I guess, or kind of limited belief system.
Exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. Sandy, it's been great spending time with you and chatting with you. I've really enjoyed it.
A real honour to be here, so thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure, and it's been a lot of fun listening to some great answers.
Musings.
Really good. Yeah. So, thank you so much for your time.
A pleasure, Elliot. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.